Welcome to today's introductory webinar for stakeholders interested in learning more about the Aerospace and Defence Chromates Reauthorisation Consortium, or ADCR Consortium. My name is Tom Persich. I'm a Principal Consultant at RPA and I'll be facilitating the running of the event today. I'm now going to pass over to Steve George, Interim Chair of the ADCR, who will say a few words before we play to you a 30-minute presentation that we have prepared. This will be followed by a question and answer session with a group of expert panelists on the line. So Steve, over to you.
Thank you, Tom. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. My name is Steve George. I'm the Interim Chair of the ADCR Consortium and will be leading today's webinar. Over the last 4 or 5 years, the approach taken by several REACH upstream authorization consortia, including some related to chromates, have come under intense challenge from a wide range of stakeholders, including ECHA, the European Commission, member states, and some NGOs. Challenges have related to lack of representative downstream user data on conditions of use, worker exposure, and substitutability of alternatives, and also on the perceived overly broad uses applied for. These concerns have resulted in delayed decisions, reduced authorization review periods, and some very exacting conditions of use being imposed. Meanwhile, downstream authorization applications have had a relatively easy ride due to greater detail and clarity. We know, regardless of the views of many commentators, that the upstream mode of authorization is vital to make the work manageable for industry, including SMEs, as well as ECHA, and to maintain supply chain flexibility. Running multiple reauthorization projects in parallel where substitution is not possible is impractical and resource intensive. We must also account for possible UK REACH authorizations, depending on the outcomes of the politics over the next few weeks. With this new consortium, we're therefore proposing to address the key concerns raised resulting from upstream authorizations in an industry-focused consortium, which is focused from the start on downstream user engagement. Before we commence the presentation, I need to point out that we would like you to submit questions as they occur to you during the presentation, but we will all have to comply with competition law. To that end, I need you to take you through the following guidance related to your obligations when submitting questions during this session. The Q&A session in this webinar must be conducted in compliance with competition law. As such, all questions and/or comments addressed during this webinar or related to this webinar shall not suggest or facilitate discussions on prices, pricing policy, or other restraints on competition of any kind, including, but not limited to, trading terms with any customer, supplier, stock levels, volumes, or sales figures. Shall not engage in discussions that could lead to a boycott or of a supplier or customer, shall not encourage or facilitate any attempt to divide customers, restrict product sales conditions, or in any other way alter the business of any participant or the ADCR pre-consortium members. Participants shall not discuss or suggest any form of consolidated or coordinated reaction to customers or to other suppliers. Participants shall not refer to a particular customer or supplier by name or to refer to any information that allows identification of a company or the identification of a business relationship between an ADCR pre-consortium member and a supplier or customer. Participants shall not exchange any information that allows them to identify a company's competitive information, including pricing and strategic planning, and none of the questions shall include export-controlled information or any participant or third-party proprietary information. Please note, none of the answers or comments provided during the Q&A session constitutes legal advice. Pre-consortium members of the ADCR and the consultant team do not make any representations or warranties with respect to the information presented, or the opinions or comments made during the Q&A session. Any particular concern related to the information presented in this webinar should be reviewed with your own legal counsel. I should add that all questions you submit go to our independent consultants RPA, who vet them for compliance before forwarding them to myself or other panelists. I will now invite Tom Persich from RPA to explain how you can submit questions during the webinar. Over to you, Tom.
Thanks, Steve. Submitting questions should be a straightforward process for you. There should already be a questions box on your screen that has opened, but if not, you can click on the small red arrow button on the Go to Webinar control panel, which should be on your screen, and that should bring the questions box out. So we're now going to proceed with today's presentation. Thank you. Hello everybody, my name is Tom Persich. Welcome to today's webinar to introduce the Aerospace and Defence Chromates Reauthorisation Consortium, or in short, the ADCR Consortium. This consortium has been formed to build on the knowledge and expertise of some of the aerospace and defence companies that were involved in the first round of authorisation applications to respond to the specific issues that will be faced by the aerospace and defence sector over the next few years in making new applications for the continued use of chromates both in the EU and the UK. In this webinar, we will provide an introduction to the challenges faced by the aerospace and defence sector in relation to securing the continued use of important chromate substances in the EU and the need for reauthorisations. This will include an indication of the timing of the need for a new round of applications. We will also provide an overview of the brief history, but also the ambitious plans of the ADCR Consortium, and will explain how you and others in your supply chains can be involved and what the benefits of membership are. We will further touch on Brexit and its implications for authorisation of the use of chromates in this sector. This is an area that we are following very closely and one that we will be watching as the situation in the UK develops. And finally, we will present the team who will deliver the reauthorisation work on behalf of the consortium and will explain what you can expect to happen next. This presentation will run for about 25 to 30 minutes, and it will be followed by a question and answer session with the aim of finishing up within an hour. We've also had some pre-submitted questions which we will answer, and as participants you're able to submit questions during the webinar using the question box on your screen. So without further ado, let's get started. Undoubtedly, authorisation is a fairly complicated process. From a business perspective, it requires complete supply chain and product content knowledge, as well as the need to know where all substances used within your activities originate from. Authorisation also requires businesses to make strategic decisions, and we can usually identify 5 different strategies which you can follow. You can replace a substance with a suitable alternative or adapt your process to avoid its use. Do note, however, that in many cases this is only possible if you are the design owner. You can redesign products or articles to avoid the use of the substance in the first place. Again, this may only be possible if you are the design owner. You can consider applying for authorisation and joining a consortium to support the applicants. You can ensure your use is covered by another authorisation, so in other words, by somebody else in your supply chain. But here we would like to stress that uses in the context of REACH authorisation are often very specific to individual companies, and they can be very risky simply relying on someone else to cover your uses because of the high level of detail required, including information on how the substance is used, what exposures may occur, the impact of non-authorisation, the availability of alternatives, research and development plans, and substitution plans. This is why it's critical, if you are relying on someone else to cover your use, that you make them aware of your use and fully respond to any data calls they may send. Or finally, you can always cease using the substance in the EU. Companies really need to weigh up the pros and cons of these options, and to do this properly, it's vitally important to prepare in good time. As we will discuss later, for some chromate applications, the time available might indeed be limited. The urgency is particularly of concern for the aerospace and defence industry, where we have a number of complicating factors that mean the need for authorisation may be critical, in addition to the challenges posed by the process itself. A total of 8 chromium-6 substance entries in REACH Annex 14 fall under the scope of the work of the ADCR Consortium, as shown on the screen. 4 of these had an initial sunset date of the 21st of September 2017, while the remaining 4 had an initial sunset date of the 22nd of January 2019. Applications for authorization were submitted for 8 substances as a result of the work of 3 previous consortia: the Chromium Trioxide Authorization Consortium, or CTAC, the Chromium-6 Compounds for Service Treatment Consortium, or the CCST, and the Global Chromates Consortium for Aerospace, or GCCA. If, during the lifetime of the ADCR Consortium, additional Chromium-6 substances are identified as substances of very high concern and are prioritized into the authorization list in REACH Annex 14, then these substances will also be given consideration, if relevant to the aerospace and defense sector. The steering committee of the consortium will decide whether these will be covered. Critically, as indicated earlier, authorizations are granted for specific combinations of substance and use, and for the downstream supply chains of the specific applicant. As far as applications that have already been submitted are concerned, these are currently being processed and are at different stages. Some of them are close to being concluded, while others are still outstanding. For all 8 chromates applied for, the sunset dates are now passed. This means that for these substances, any company that wishes to lawfully continue their use in the European Economic Area must belong to the supply chain of a previous applicant, and the use must fall within the scope of the submitted applications. After the authorizations are granted by the European Commission, the company will be covered by the authorization provided that its use of the chromate substance complies with the conditions specified by the European Commission, and that the authorization holder is in the user's upstream supply chain. When it comes to the authorization decisions that are pending, what can be expected? It is likely that the initial authorization applicants will not be granted the review periods that were originally hoped for. Furthermore, the European Commission is expected to impose conditions setting out the risk management measures to be adopted by users, and to also impose requirements for the collection and submission of data to ECHA from worker exposure monitoring. Whilst the requirements for monitoring data will impose a burden on the chromate supply chain, it will also give an incentive to users of chromates to collect data that will be valuable to the reauthorization of their uses. We will now look at the challenges faced by the aerospace and defense sector in reauthorization of the chromates. First and foremost, the industry does depend on various chromates in order to meet functional requirements. Airworthiness and safety are a top priority, and high-performance materials and formulations must be used. Safety-critical nature of the industry in turn means that any changes to products require substantive evidence of compliance with standards, and even if achievable, that can take many years. Also, the volume of use of the chromates might not be particularly high when considering the overall market for those substances. For example, the volumes of specialty formulations used by aerospace and defense companies is often quite low compared to the formulator's overall volumes, potentially resulting in a poor business case for formulators to support the aerospace and defense industry's authorization applications and the continued supply of the chromates. As a consequence, the industry itself must take proactive steps to allow relevant uses to continue. Another really important issue is the complex nature of aerospace and defense supply chains. There's likely to be multiple downstream users and users of a particular chromate. Many such users are small or medium-sized enterprises, or they may lack the technical skills to apply for their own downstream user authorization. The nature of uses can also be highly variable, and given the many tiers in aerospace supply chains, the level of visibility throughout the supply chain is often quite poor. Not every actor in the supply chain can apply for authorization, but all of the specific uses must be included in an application for them to be properly covered by the authorization, which is fundamental to continued use. Turning now to the potential for an upstream application, before even considering the information required for the chemical safety report, the analysis of alternatives, and the socio-economic analysis, it is essential to establish the following. What are the uses? For example, what precise function does the specific chromate play? How is it used?
Is the chemical sprayed? Is it brushed or is it dipped? And how is it provided? Is it provided in liquid or solid form, for example? Are potential alternatives available? Are they technically and economically feasible? How long will they take to implement? The situation is further complicated as not every actor in the supply chain will have the same commercial interests in any one particular substance use combination. It should also be remembered that in most cases the applications will be reauthorizations. The reauthorizations to be submitted will receive an even greater scrutiny than the first time round, particularly in light of a recent decision of the European Court of Justice which annulled the authorization previously granted to a formulator of lead chromate pigments on the basis that the applicant had not demonstrated that suitable alternatives were available on the market. Moreover, the relevant chromates authorizations which will be granted to the previous applicants will be accompanied by requirements for more extensive worker exposure monitoring data and requirements for end users to adhere to stricter risk management measures and operating conditions. Demonstrating compliance with such requirements will be key in securing long review periods as part of the reauthorization. Due perhaps to conditions placed on the initial authorizations to be granted or to the more bespoke use description developed as part of ADCR's work, some uses may need to be split and applied for separately, or new uses may emerge. In some cases, this could result in the need for applications for new uses. As the sunset dates are now in the past, such new uses need to be applied for as a matter of urgency. It should be noted that it is not expected that there will be many such cases, but it is anticipated that each use needs to be checked carefully and accurately to confirm compliance, or non-compliance, with the conditions associated set out in the final decisions for each relevant substance use authorization. The ADCR Consortium is familiar with all of the above challenges, and for this reason it is being set up even before the initial authorizations are granted in order to allow sufficient time to map all relevant chromate uses and to allow the careful planning of reauthorization timelines. Seven pre-consortium members are coordinating the setting up of the ADCR Consortium. All of these companies, the identities of which will be revealed to any company signing a Memorandum of Understanding, have previously been involved in the work of the original Chromates Authorization Consortia. These seven companies have been busy since early 2019 working on establishing communication channels with the applicants in the previous consortia, tendering the consortium management and technical services of the work and selecting the preferred consultant team, developing the consortium agreement and the technical services agreement, and organising these webinars and the launch meeting in September, as well as advertising the existence and goals of this consortium as widely as possible. Let us now explain the scope of the work that needs to be undertaken in this consortium. In terms of sectors to be covered, the work will be much more focused on what matters to companies like yours. We will be covering the uses of chromates in the aerospace and defence sectors and also in the production of aeroderivatives. In other words, civilian applications of aerospace components and equipment. Non-aerospace and non-defence uses might be considered if for specific reasons the steering committee of the consortium decides that they should be covered. Our focus will be initially on the chromates currently on the authorization list. However, we expect the consortium to run for several years. If in that period additional chromium compounds relevant to the aerospace and defence industry are added to the authorization list, they will be addressed in our work, subject to approval by the consortium's steering committee. In terms of substance use combinations, we still aim for upstream applications like it has been done before, and the starting point is the uses applied for by the three original consortia. All aerospace and defence uses covered by those consortia will be considered. We are currently engaging with the previous applicants to gain their support for the upstream applications planned. Results so far have been very encouraging, and we expect several previous applicants to attend the 20th of September launch meeting to be held in Brussels. However, the scope of these uses themselves will be carefully assessed. Lessons learned from the first round of applications will guide the overall strategy to making these applications and to the level of detail required within the applications. We are familiar with the shortcomings of previous applications, and all those involved in the previous applications have been on a learning journey. Original applications that were submitted later did address several of the inadequacies of the early ones, and we are committed to addressing, to the degree possible, all criticisms made by the ECHA committees and the regulators on the original applications. In this context, some previously applied for uses may be reapplied for, provided at least one paying end-user consortium member has an interest in them. On the other hand, some uses would need to be more narrowly defined to address criticisms made by the ECHA committees and conditions imposed by the European Commission on the granted authorisations. The narrowing of the scope of some uses will also help to better target the analysis, which will in turn increase the chance of positive application outcomes. New applications and applicants will be welcome, if relevant to the aerospace and defence sector, and associated derivative uses, of course. However, these entirely new applications will not benefit from transitional arrangements stemming from their being covered by an application before the latest application dates. In practical terms, if it is established that there is at least one interested end user who is willing to cover the cost of such a new application, this will be given priority to ensure that the submission is done as quickly as possible to prevent business disruption. Finally, UK REACH authorisations will be within scope, if required, in addition to EU REACH authorisations. The UK regulators have given indications of what the new UK REACH system would require. However, the exact timing or conditions of the UK's exit from the EU are uncertain. We are following this area closely, and if urgent action is required, for example, if original applications need to be resubmitted, this shall be facilitated as a matter of priority. We understand that the cost of preparing, submitting, and defending an application for authorization is a very important consideration for those interested in joining the consortium. The aim has been to make cost sharing fair and to encourage as wide a participation as possible. Unlike what has been done in previous consortia, end users will pay for dossier preparation and application fee costs. Dossier preparation costs will be use-specific and take into account the number of ADCR members applying for that use. Upstream applicants can be non-paying members, but can only join as a non-paying member if one or more paying end users supports their associated downstream uses and if they themselves do not have a use that needs to be covered in the application. There will be a cost differential between large and SME end user members in favour of the SMEs. This is considered appropriate to reflect the different abilities of companies to shoulder the costs of authorization, but also importantly to make membership more attractive to SMEs to the benefit of the entire supply chain. As previously discussed, the ADCR Consortium is currently engaging with previous applicants to gain their support, and there are very encouraging signs. Yet, the consortium membership is certainly open to new upstream applicants, such as importers or formulators. Those will be particularly important for applications to be submitted to the UK authorities after Brexit. Beyond the applicants, anyone involved in aerospace and defence supply chain and who uses chromates or relies on components that are treated with chromates would make ideal members of the ADCR Consortium. The range of possible members includes original equipment manufacturers, build-to-spec and build-to-print suppliers, maintenance, repair and operations companies, as well as airlines. We hope by now that you will have a reasonable idea about the background to the establishment of the ADCR Consortium, key principles underlying its operation, and ultimately how it can support you in ensuring business continuity for your company. We believe that membership of the ADCR Consortium will offer clear and tangible benefits to those who join us. Firstly, membership will help you grapple with your Chromates authorization challenges and take control of your own REACH compliance needs. It has become clear that in order for reauthorizations to be granted with long review periods, reauthorization applications need to be more detailed and focused, and this by necessity means that reauthorizations will be for more specific, that is, narrower and more detailed uses than previously, with better validated data related to the real-world conditions of use and risk management. On top of this, as you well know, supply chains are complex and frequently not transparent. Therefore, if you want to ensure that your specific conditions are covered and the specific substance use combinations you have a particular interest in are supported, then you should no longer assume that someone else will take care of your REACH reauthorization needs. You should consider acting now and securing a seat at the table where the decisions affecting the aerospace and defence sectors will be made. It would also be ideal if you were to encourage both your suppliers and your customers to join the consortium. They will certainly be able to offer data, information and perspectives which will help us refine our analysis, reduce uncertainties and generate stronger arguments. We believe that coming together as a group that covers as much as possible of the aerospace and defence sectors will ensure uniformity of arguments and will strengthen our voice both at the application submission stage and post-submission stage when the reauthorization applications will need to be defended. In addition, by joining the ADCR Consortium, you can be certain that you are joining a body that has first and foremost in its focus the needs of your supply chain. There will be no distractions from uses that are not relevant to the aerospace and defence sectors, greater efficiency in the application strategy, and reduced information gaps and uncertainties from trying to balance the arguments across the board. This should mean that the consortium is more agile and more able to quickly address issues as they arise. For those of you who are located outside the EU, the fact that you are following the webinar today means that you are most probably aware of the challenges lying ahead of you. Non-EU companies should not underestimate the potential for supply chain disruption as a result of impacts on your EU-based suppliers, formulators, or EU-based customers. Again, your membership in the ADCR Consortium will help you control those risks by pooling resources and sharing the costs of reauthorization. We would also hope that you will convey this message to other non-EU-based companies that you work with, which may be unaware of the risks or may consider that the REACH regulation does not really affect them. Finally, it is worth reiterating that in setting up the consortium, a conscious decision has been made to keep costs for SMEs low. We believe that SMEs must be represented as widely as possible, and the cost-sharing basis is geared towards achieving this target. We have been busy in the first half of this year organising a pre-consortium, holding discussions with the previous consortia applicants, following regulatory developments and selecting the service providers for the ADCR Consortium work. In the beginning of the summer, we held a pre-consortium kick-off meeting with the RPA team in London on the 10th and the 11th of July. Since then, we have remained in very frequent communication with the aim of agreeing the terms and conditions of the consortium agreement and the service contract agreement. We have also made extensive efforts to advertise the consortium, including distributing a flyer at the Le Bourget Air Show in July, giving an interview to Chemical Watch, and actively approaching a wide range of trade associations, institutes, and intergovernmental organisations, for example, the European Space Agency and the European Defence Agency. You may have also seen the recent article publicising the ADCR in ECHA's electronic newsletter. We would of course be grateful if each one of you would also spread the word about the formation of the consortium. We have also set up a website dedicated to the ADCR. This website will be a significant source of up-to-date information, and we encourage all interested parties to follow it closely. What is planned to come next includes additional webinars, but those attending today do not need to register for another of these webinars. On the 20th of September, the launch event will be held at Field Fisher's offices in Brussels. Participants are required to sign a memorandum of understanding beforehand, and participation is limited to one person per company due to space limitations. This will be a very important meeting which should not be missed by those interested in joining the consortium, even if they do not formally do so before the day of the meeting. Details for the meeting are provided on the ADCR website. Following the meeting, a period of scoping will start where consortium members will be asked to declare which substance use combinations they have an interest in, what volume of data, particularly monitoring data, they hold and will share with the consultants, and members will also be asked to provide information on the structure of their supply chain. Based on this preliminary collection of information, a timetable of reauthorization activities will be generated. Where new uses are identified, we will swiftly move to setting up specific use groups that will work on the generation of the relevant authorization documents as a matter of urgency. In addition, at the end of October, it is possible that the UK will have left the European Union. If this were to occur, authorizations for all uses previously applied for to the European Chemicals Agency and which are of relevance to the UK market will be applied for to the UK agency. We are in contact with the relevant UK authorities and we have an understanding of their requirements, and we will continue to engage with them to ensure that authorizations are successfully submitted. After any urgent cases have been resolved, work will begin on chromate uses with a late deadline for submission of the reauthorization applications, the so-called review reports. The ADCR will be undertaking separate scoping phases for new use groups to be set up and work to be planned. For a period of 3 months, such use groups will be advertised and new members will be invited to join if they have an interest. This approach will allow companies to become members at a later stage when it is most relevant to their business. Please note, however, that if a company does not join from the beginning of the consortium's life, it is classed as a late joining member and has to make increased financial contributions. We will explain this in more detail in today's question and answer session towards the end of the webinar. The contract for managing and delivering the technical work of the ADCR has been awarded to a team of consultants led by Risk and Policy Analysts, or RPA. RPA in the UK is one of the leading and most successful REACH authorization consultants. In addition, over the past 4 years, RPA has developed a good understanding of the aims and requirements of work of the industry through working with the International Aerospace Environmental Group. RPA has also led the development of applications for authorization for chromates for several past clients and has extensive experience in the development of analyses of alternatives and socio-economic analyses. RPA has also worked on an assessment of the implications of Brexit on UK chemicals companies and has a long-standing relationship with the UK regulators. We will be supported by our sister company RPA Europe, based in Italy, which also has REACH authorization experience. RPA will also be supported by FOBIG, a German consultancy which has prepared many successful chemical safety reports starting from the earliest days of authorization, including CSRs for several chromates applications which have been positively received by ECHA's Risk Assessment Committee and resulted in long review periods being granted. Additional support will be provided by the French branch of Bureau Veritas, which has experience and expertise in the development of analyses of alternatives and chemical safety reports. Importantly, Bureau Veritas' Aerospace division, based in Toulouse, counts 50 experts, mainly engineers from the European aerospace industry and civil aviation sector, and provides specialised services to clients ranging from civil aviation authorities to OEMs. Finally, the day-to-day administrative and financial management of the consortium will be undertaken by the Brussels office of Field Fisher. Field Fisher is a leading European law firm with more than 1,450 employees, working across 24 offices. It has extensive experience in setting up and managing REACH consortia and will also provide legal advice to the consortium on an ongoing basis. Together, this team provides the specialist expertise required in supply chain mapping and supply chain communication, analysing alternatives, undertaking socio-economic analyses, preparing authorization-specific chemical safety reports, and delivering the additional technical and consortium management support services required. This team also has the experience and expertise to provide the services required pre- and post-submission of authorization applications. Importantly, the team can cover several major European languages, including English, German, French, Italian, and Spanish, and RPA has in-house languages skills that cover several other European languages. So, we hope you have now gained a good understanding of the efforts that the ADCR Consortium plans to make for the reauthorization of the use of chromates both in the EEA and in the UK. This slide provides an overview of the relevant links and the main ADCR email address where all queries should be sent. The ADCR website will be regularly updated with news and announcements, so you're all very much welcome and encouraged to follow it closely. We really cannot overemphasize how important it is to obtain your support in joining the ADCR as members, notifying relevant companies in your supply chain to do the same, and later on responding to the information requests that the technical consultants will address to you. If you represent a trade association, your support in conveying the messages delivered today to your membership will be important for the success of our work also. We need effective communication with all our suppliers to provide information and reduce uncertainty about where chromates are used in order to show the regulators that we have a good understanding of the issues facing the aerospace and defence sector, as well as for us to properly assess risks. Your input is vital for that, and the more information we receive, the more able we will be to prepare strong, convincing applications for authorization to the benefit of us all. One final point we need to emphasize is that if you are based outside the EU, authorization may still matter to you, and your input is also very important. For example, if you're based in the United States but export formulations containing chromate substance on Annex 14 into the EU, the uses inside the EU may still require reauthorization, and this will present a business risk to you or for your customers. For the benefit of any company in the global aerospace and defence supply chain that relies on EU formulators and formulations containing chromates, it is essential to identify and assess the implications of non-authorization and put in place measures to preserve continuity of supply. Only by working together can we overcome the challenges that are presented by authorization.
Okay, so thank you all for listening to the presentation. I'm now going to pass over to Steve again, who's going to kick off the question and answer session.
Thank you again, Tom. We will now go into the Q&A session, but before I do, I need to remind you of the compliance requirements, which we will leave on the screen throughout. So we're going to have a number of industry experts as panelists today, and these include myself, Steve George from Rolls-Royce, Erin Yeager from Pratt & Whitney, Dave Pinsky from Raytheon, Scott Fetter from Lockheed Martin, and Muriel, Dave, and Maud Grunschar from Field Fisher. And we'll also have Panos Zarangianis from RPA. So we've got a number of questions to go through. Keep them coming in. That's wonderful. The first one we have is, how much will it cost to join ADCR? And can you provide an indication of the cost per reauthorized use? Well, I'll take that myself. The initial cost of joining the consortium is described in the consortium agreement. A non-refundable pre-funding cash call equivalent to 12,500 euros per cost share allocation will be issued to each paying member at the time such member joins the consortium. Large companies will have a cost sharing allocation of 4 times that of SMEs. Therefore, an SME joining the consortium would pay 12,500 upfront, while a large company would pay 50,000. Upstream applicants have the choice between 1 cost share allocation or 0 costs. However, the latter comes without any voting rights. As work progresses into the preparation of specific applications, subsequent cash calls will be sent to the relevant consortium members involved in each specific AFA. The total costs of authorization to a member will be highly dependent upon the uses the member has an interest in and the number and composition of members in the use group. A formulation use, which requires minimal effort for the AOA, will be considerably less costly than an end use with, say, 10 or 20 relevant end users. An illustrative example of potential costs per applicant will be presented at the launch meeting in Brussels on 20th of September. The key point to take away is that the greater the number of companies involved in the consortium, the lower the cost of applying per consortium member. Though at this time it is very difficult to give specific numbers without a lot of assumptions. Right, the next question I have is, we are currently covered by an upstream application, so what will be different this time round? Can I ask David Pinsky to pick that one up, please?
Oh, sure. Thank you, Steve. So there are certainly differences, but there are also similarities. The similarities, these will be upstream applications. The original applicants will be involved and the same substances are going to be covered. So that's going to be similar, but there are important differences. So firstly, the uses will be more narrowly defined, with each being traced to an original application, and it will be a subset of that application. Now, given this narrowing of the definition of uses to be applied for, it's important that A&D sector companies that are using a current authorization or AFA be involved in the work of the ADCR to assure that your particular uses will be covered. Secondly, the costs will be covered by end users, not by the applicants, and the cost allocation will be on a substance use specific basis. Thirdly, given the experience of the initial round of applications, the ADCR Consortium is fully committed to developing applications which are detailed, respect the following lessons learned in the initial application process, and meet the requirements and expectations of the regulators. As a result, consortium members should expect to be more closely involved in data collection and analysis than in the previous round. And finally, post-Brexit, UK authorizations will be in the scope of the ADCR's work.
Thank you very much, David. Much appreciated. The next one we have is, what information and data will we be required to provide if we join the consortium, and how soon do we need to provide these? Erin, could you possibly pick that one up, please?
Sure, thank you. So a range of different data will be required for the submission of successful authorization applications, and their success will be heavily dependent on the efforts that members make in terms of generating and obtaining the data needed to help strengthen these arguments, including the engagement of your relevant suppliers. During the scoping phase, a preliminary set of data will be required. We'll be looking first for substances and their specific uses that are of interest to each particular member, as well as all monitoring data that you currently have on human health and environmental emissions, as well as future plans that you may have for collecting this monitoring data. In addition, you'll be asked to provide details of your relevant suppliers, including their names, location, and roles of upstream and downstream stakeholders. As we progress beyond the scoping phase, there'll be additional information that's required from all members. And this information will include things like, why is the chromate being used in your applications? You know, what's its functional purpose? We'll also need to have extensive information on known alternatives or potential alternatives, and details on your company's past, current, and planned R&D efforts on alternatives. If alternatives have been identified, then you'll be asked to identify your timeline as to how long it will take to substitute to those alternatives. There'll be information needed for the socioeconomic analysis portion of the dossier, and that will include information on profits and number of jobs associated with the continued use of the relevant chromates, and then information on intra and extra EEA competition in the relevant markets. Some of this info will be commercially sensitive. We recognize that. The information will be collected by the consultants acting as third-party trustees and will be kept strictly confidential. The consultant service agreement includes strict provisions on the collection, storage, handling, and use of confidential information. And RPA is the leader of the technical team. It will be happy to discuss confidentiality questions and needs with each member individually.
Thank you very much. It's a lovely segue on to the next one. So how do you guarantee that the information we provide is kept confidential? Panos, as RPA, could you possibly pick that one up, please?
Yes, thank you, Steve. Just as a follow-up to what Erin was explaining, RPA and the service team partners who are working with us will be acting as the independent third-party trustees, and we will be responsible for ensuring that all information received from members and from the supply chain service that we will undertake will be collated, aggregated, anonymized, and presented both within the consortium and in application documents in such a format that individual respondent information cannot be deciphered. There is therefore the strictest compliance with competition law at all times. RPA and our partners are very well versed and highly experienced in working in this way, having helped the industry with over 50 applications for authorization. Interested parties would also be advised to review paragraph 9 of Annex 7 of the Consortium Agreement, which further elaborates the processes of handling confidential information.
Thank you very much, Panos. Erin, could you please pick this one up, please? How will we know which uses will be applied for and when?
Okay, so the best way of ensuring that a use of interest to you is covered is by actually joining the ADCR Consortium. Now, the Consortium Agreement requires that at least one end user member supports a use before that use can be included in the work of the consortium. So you can't assume that someone else will step in and support your use. You need to be personally involved in that decision-making process. Now, more generally, the scoping phase, which is planned to run between September and January, will be the period during which all the interested parties are expected to register their interest in specific combinations of substance and use. Now, we recognize that the applications will need to be submitted at least 18 months before the end of the review period and will likely be staggered based on these specific review periods. However, the exact timelines won't be known until the initial applications are granted. The consortium agreement explains that if after the initial scoping phase there is an additional substance use that's needed, a preparatory stage for a future application will be provided for. The start of work on the new use application will be advertised, and new consortium members will be able to join. Now, this publicity will explain the timelines of the upcoming authorization work, and interested parties are strongly encouraged to follow the news section of the ADCR website. However, please note that if you do not join in this initial joining period, you will not be considered a founding member and will have some of the fees that are associated with the late joining fee if you decide to join one of these later scoped phases.
Thank you very much. It's a good one. In case of a no-deal Brexit, would new AFAs be submitted in the UK by existing or previous consortia or by ADCR? Well, the consortium is in frequent communication with the initial applicants for the 3 relevant Chromate consortia, as previously mentioned. These initial applicants have been invited to become members, and responses so far have been generally positive. Currently, the post-Brexit requirements for authorizations that have been submitted in the EU are not clear, but we will remain in close contact with the initial consortia to coordinate activities. The consortium commits to working towards ensuring that all those covered by initial applications submitted in the EU will also be covered as appropriate by applications to be submitted to the UK authorities. The next one. Does our company need to join the consortium now if the reauthorization of a use we have an interest in is only required in 4 years' time, for example? Well, we've made a few references to this already. There are benefits to joining the consortium now, even if a use is to be worked on at a later stage. First of all, if you sign the consortium agreement by early to mid-December, you will be counted as a founding member rather than a late joining member. Late joining members will, according to the consortium agreement, pay a late membership fee, which will be based on the costs incurred to date, plus 30%. That's both the common cost share and any specific substance use cost share incurred to date. Now, that's really important because the earlier people are in the consortium, the better we can manage the consortium and the more effective it is, which is why there is a late joining fee. If you join early as a founding member, you will also be able to keep abreast of developments from early on, and you will have the opportunity to participate in decision making and the use structure from the outset. However, the steering committee, which is obviously made up of members, may at any time decide by qualified majority to reopen the membership to allow additional companies to join as late joining members, depending on the expiry date of the relevant authorization for a substance and use. That'll be for a period of 3 months provided that it then informs all companies that have a declared interest in joining the consortium after the initial closing date, and that it adequately advertises this reopening of the membership. Right, the next one. Our company incorporates several legal entities. Should these join the consortium separately or as a single organization? Scott Fetter, could you please pick that one up, please?
Yes, sure. Thank you, George. Thank you, Steve. Companies interested in joining the ADCR Consortium would be welcome to join either as a single organization with a single joining fee or as a multiple entity with multiple joining fees. In the case of a single organization covering multiple entities, there must be over 50% ownership and operational control for affiliates to be covered by a parent organization. As previously explained, the size of the joining fee varies according to the size of the legal entity. For instance, a large legal entity versus a small or medium size, and the cost sharing for each application for authorization will consider the relative size of the members, again, large versus SME, as shown in Article 16.1 of the Consortium Agreement. From the perspective of the management of the consortium, it would be easier if a company joined as a single legal entity, as this would simplify the administration of its membership. On the other hand, joining as a single legal entity might complicate your own internal management. Ultimately, each company should feel free to make their own choice.
I apologize, I was talking to mute. One for Field Fisher. How many people from our company can join in the 20th September meeting, and will there be any cost associated with attendance? Thank you, Maud.
Muriel speaking, in fact. So generally, only one person per consortium member or interested party will be allowed to attend. This is purely for logistic reasons. However, there will be a web conferencing facility that will allow remote participation. This facility will only be open to potential members who have signed a memorandum of understanding. Participation at the meeting will have no cost, but participants will need to make their own travel and accommodation arrangements.
Thank you very much. Panos, one for you. What is the best way of keeping up to date with developments in the ADCR Consortium?
Thank you. Basically, interested parties can do two things. One is to follow the news section of the ADCR website that we have set up, and the other is to contact us directly via the email that Tom has presented in the presentation. The website will be frequently updated with new developments and announcements, while the email approach will be more appropriate for company-specific questions, something that is more relevant to a specific interested party that they would, somebody would like to have information on.
Thank you very much. We've got a couple of participants asking questions about the definition of small or medium enterprise. Perhaps Field Fisher, could you please pick that one up, please?
Yes, thank you, Steve. So in terms of how it will be decided or considered which applicant could be an SME or not, this will be demonstrated by supporting evidence, and the reference would be the ECA the way ECA determines this for ECA administrative fees, and it's related to the Annex 6 of Regulation 340/2008, which is the ECA fee regulation. And there is also a Commission recommendation on what is considered as a micro, small, or medium-sized enterprise. And all the different conditions and criteria are described in such documents.
Thank you. So it's the legal definition as used commonly in Europe. Thank you very much. Here's one I think I want to give to RPA. If one is interested in the consortium but is unable to participate in the launch meeting, by what means can they obtain a record of that launch meeting?
Okay, For those who cannot really attend in person, there will be a possibility of web conference facility becoming available to them. Still, for those people who would like to participate remotely, a signed memorandum of understanding will be required. Whether there will be a record, I would have to defer to Phil Fisher to see if this will be possible to be arranged using their systems, because we will be holding the meeting at their offices.
Well, we will discuss this internally. It has not been discussed. We have to check. We will have to revert. It will be a very long meeting, so maybe a bit difficult, but we will check that.
Yeah, but the web conference facility will be available for those who cannot attend in person.
Yeah, sure. But then they register into the remote access, yes. But to record it and have it available afterwards, I cannot tell you now if it's possible or not.
Thank you.
Thank you, both of you. I would add to that the purpose of the launch meeting is to allow attendees to really understand the benefits or not of joining, and therefore to get their questions answered. So the interactiveness is the main thing. So please join however you can for the interaction. I have another one here, which is, are there some publicly available estimates from the prior applications regarding the cost of dossier preparation, and what are the ECHA application fees, and where are these published? I will answer the second part first, and then I will try to defer to Erin to see if there's anything she can comment on the first part, if I may. So Erin, I'll give you a moment to think about this one. On the ECHA application fees, which would be shared by the end users in this particular consortium structure, the application fees are determined by a European regulation, which determines the application fees based on the company size, and that is the applicant size. So in the case of a formulator that is applying on behalf of his own use and also the end use of his customers, it would be based on the size of the formulator. And judged accordingly. Erin, could you pick up the other part? Is there anything publicly available?
I really don't think there's anything that's publicly available on the cost of dossier preparation. Perhaps in one of ECHA's reports that they had done on authorization, there may be figures, but I'm not sure how relevant they are to the work that we've done. I'd have to think about this offline and speak with RPA, but realize that although we're doing unique substance use dossier applications, because you need a unique application for each of these, there's also the benefit of commonality among many of those applications as well. You know, just a standard explanation of the aerospace industry, even some of the hazards that need to be included in a CSR. Many of the chromates have very similar hazards. So I think it's such a complex question, and there would be nothing available publicly that would give a true indication of that. I think I would recommend that you speak with RPA and the Phil Fisher team to determine potential cost estimates.
And as we said earlier, of course, we will be presenting some indicative cost examples at the launch meeting on the 20th of September. I want to reinforce the point that attending the launch meeting does not commit anyone to joining the consortium, and there is no cost, but it does require signing of the memorandum of understanding for non-disclosure purposes. Here's an interesting one. What is the length of the requested authorization for continued use? For example, will all substances and uses request continued use until 2030 or longer or shorter? I'll give this a go and see if anyone wants to add to what I say. Ultimately, the review period requested has to be based on the availability of alternatives and any potential substitution activity. If it is the case that for some uses there are no available alternatives still, and despite good efforts on R&D, we do not have any insight as to when something might become available. I would hope that we would target something of the order of a 12-year review period with this consortium. To achieve that, we are going to have to satisfy the committees that all their concerns have been dealt with. And that is obviously something for the future and yet has yet to be frozen, but we are addressing all their concerns as we can. For anything where there is a known alternative, which there is a high confidence can be substituted in a shorter period, I don't think we could target that sort of length of time. Beyond that, I'm not sure what else can be said. Erin, is there anything you would add to that, or RPA?
I guess the only thing that I would add is that I think that there is a possibility that we could request longer than 12 years, even though that's the current standard. I think we could potentially request longer, but I don't think that that can be answered until we really get involved in the specific substance use sub-teams and figure out status of alternatives and what the needs of members and their supply chain are.
Thank you. I appreciate that there are still questions coming in, but we've now gone past the top of the hour. Thank you very much for your engagement, everyone. Thank you for attending. I want to thank all the panelists for your input and contribution. For further details about the consortium and how to register interest for the 20th of September launch meeting, please visit the ADCR Consortium website. And I wish you a very good time for the rest of your day, and hope to speak with anyone soon if I come across them. Thank you very much.